Welcome to Golden Rule Wisdom, where ancient stories illuminate our modern lives and guide us toward profound inner peace and true happiness. Once upon a time, in a distant village, lived a young man who carried a strange and heavy burden on his back. He carried a large, worn burlap sack everywhere he went, drawing curious and mocking stares from everyone he passed in the town. This bag was not filled with precious goods, but with ordinary rough stones gathered from the dusty roads he traveled every day. Every time someone insulted him, mocked his dreams, or hurt his feelings, he would bend down and pick up a sharp stone. He believed that keeping these stones would help him remember the pain and protect him from ever being hurt by others again. "I will never forget what they did to me," he whispered bitterly, dropping another heavy rock into his increasingly worn, dirty sack. As the weeks and months passed, the young man faced many unkind people, and his collection of painful memories grew significantly larger. A merchant cheated him in the market, and a dark, jagged stone was immediately added to the heavy sack on his shoulders. A former friend betrayed his trust, leaving him heartbroken, and another massive, cold rock found its way into his ever-growing emotional burden. His family criticized his life choices constantly, and handfuls of small but sharp pebbles were thrown into the bag without any hesitation. Over time, the bag became incredibly heavy, forcing his shoulders to slump and his once energetic steps to become slow and painful. The physical weight of the stones perfectly mirrored the growing darkness, resentment, and profound bitterness taking over his once joyful, youthful soul. He could no longer look up at the bright blue sky or appreciate the beautiful blooming flowers growing along the dusty path. His eyes were constantly fixed on the dirt, searching for the next stone to add to his miserable collection of past wrongs. People began to avoid him, repelled by his gloomy aura and the terrifying sack of rocks he dragged around like a prisoner. The young man felt entirely alone, convinced that the world was a cruel place and that everyone was out to destroy him. One scorching summer afternoon, he decided to cross a steep, treacherous mountain pass to reach a new town far away from home. The incline was brutal, and the heavy sack of grudges pulled him backward with every agonizing step he took up the mountain. Sweat poured down his face, his knees trembled violently, and he gasped for air as the crushing weight threatened to break him. Just as he was about to collapse from utter exhaustion, he spotted an old merchant resting peacefully under a large, shady tree. The old man possessed a serene smile and kind, sparkling eyes that seemed to understand the deepest secrets of the human heart. The merchant watched the struggling youth with deep compassion, noticing the massive, bulging sack that was slowly destroying the boy's fragile spine. "Young traveler, why do you carry a mountain of rocks on your back while climbing such a steep and dangerous path today?" The young man dropped the bag with a loud thud, wiping his sweaty brow while glaring defensively at the gentle old stranger. "These are not just rocks," he panted angrily. "They are memories of every single person who has ever wronged or hurt me. I carry them to remind myself never to trust anyone again, because human beings are inherently cruel, selfish, and deeply malicious creatures." The wise merchant nodded slowly, his expression remaining completely calm and non-judgmental as he processed the young man's deeply painful, bitter words. Without saying a word, the old man stood up, picked up a small stone from the ground, and tossed it at him. The stone hit the young man's boot harmlessly and bounced off into the dirt, leaving no mark or injury on his foot. Furious, the young man immediately bent down, grabbed the very same stone, and aggressively shoved it deep into his overflowing heavy bag. "Why did you do that?" he yelled, his face red with anger. "Now I have to carry your insult with me forever." The old merchant smiled softly and gestured toward the heavy sack. "Tell me, who is carrying the weight of that stone now?" The young man blinked in confusion, his anger faltering for a brief moment as he tried to understand the old man's question. "I threw the stone, and my hands are completely empty," the merchant explained gently, showing his open, unburdened palms to the youth. "I hold no weight, no anger, and no pain. My journey continues to be light, peaceful, and completely free of unnecessary burdens." "But you," the merchant continued, pointing at the sack, "you chose to pick it up and add it to your own suffering." The young man stared at his dirty hands and then at the massive sack, a sudden realization beginning to dawn on him. The people who hurt you have already moved on with their lives. They are not carrying the heavy weight of those actions. Their cruel words and selfish actions were like that stone I just tossed. Once thrown, they no longer belong to the thrower. It is your reaction that becomes your true burden, my friend. You are the one choosing to pick up their discarded cruelty. You cannot control what others say or do to you, but you can always choose what you decide to carry with you. The young man fell silent, the profound truth of the merchant's words echoing loudly in his tired mind and aching, heavy heart. For years he had believed he was punishing his enemies by remembering their wrongs, but he was only punishing his own soul. Every stone in that bag was a moment he had allowed someone else to steal his joy, his peace, and his freedom. He looked at the old merchant, tears welling up in his eyes as the immense emotional exhaustion finally overwhelmed his stubborn pride. "How do I stop carrying this pain?" he whispered brokenly, his voice trembling with a mixture of profound sorrow and desperate hope. "Forgiveness," the merchant replied softly. "Forgiveness is not about pretending they were right. It is about realizing you deserve to be free. When you forgive, you do not excuse their bad behavior. You simply refuse to let their darkness become your lifelong, heavy burden." The young man slowly reached down and untied the thick, knotted rope that kept his massive sack of painful memories tightly closed. He reached inside and pulled out the very first stone he had ever collected, a smooth grey rock from his early childhood. "This was my neighbor, who laughed at my dreams," he said quietly, before tossing the stone far away down the steep mountain. He pulled out another jagged rock. "This was the friend who betrayed my trust." He threw it forcefully into the deep valley. With every single stone he discarded, he felt a tangible release of pressure in his chest and a lightness in his soul. He emptied the bag faster and faster, tears streaming freely down his face as years of accumulated bitterness tumbled down the mountainside. The loud clattering of rocks hitting the ground sounded like chains breaking, echoing beautifully across the vast, peaceful valley below the trail. Finally, he grabbed the bottom of the sack and shook out the remaining pebbles and dust, leaving the dirty bag completely empty. He stood up straight for the first time in years, his spine popping as his shoulders relaxed into a natural, comfortable posture. He took a deep, refreshing breath of the crisp mountain air, feeling the warm sunlight kissing his tear-stained face with gentle grace. The world around him suddenly looked incredibly vibrant. The leaves seemed greener, the sky bluer, and the distant birdsong sounded wonderfully sweet. He turned to thank the wise merchant, but the old man had already packed his belongings and was walking quietly away alone. "Remember," the merchant called back without turning around, "your heart is a sacred temple, not a storage room for other people's mistakes." The young man smiled brightly, dropping the empty, useless burlap sack onto the dusty ground and leaving it behind him forever today. He continued his journey over the mountain pass, his steps now light, energetic, and filled with a renewed sense of joyous purpose. Whenever he encountered cruel or unkind people in the future, he remembered the profound lesson he learned on that steep mountain trail. He visualized their insults as stones thrown at his feet, and he simply chose to step over them and peacefully walk away. He refused to pick up their negativity, preserving his inner peace and protecting his beautiful soul from the heavy weight of resentment. Many of us walk through our daily lives carrying invisible sacks filled with the heavy stones of past grievances and unresolved anger. We replay old arguments, hold on to bitter grudges, and allow the cruelty of others to dictate our present happiness and future potential. But holding on to anger is like drinking deadly poison and expecting the other person to suffer the terrible consequences of your choice. The beautiful act of forgiveness is the ultimate key to unlocking the heavy chains that bind us to our most painful past. You absolutely deserve to live a life free from the crushing emotional burdens created by those who did not value your heart. Drop the stones today. Breathe in the sweet freedom of letting go and embrace the beautiful peace that forgiveness brings your soul. May you always choose lightness over heavy resentment, and may your journey through life be filled with boundless joy and profound serenity. Thank you for watching Golden Rule Wisdom. Remember to forgive, stay wonderfully free, and always carry love in your beautiful, open heart.